Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL. I've lost my no. I was trying to be sympathetic and share with your husky voice, James. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL. Each and every Monday, People's Poll Day today, James. Podding as usual.
Your name's Serge. My name's James, and you're trying to take the piss out of me. I'm going to do my best to power through this, but as you can probably tell, my voice is not what it normally is.
Yeah. For those thinking, why is James husky? Obviously, you were at the cup final yesterday, which is a conversation we'll save for a bit of Tottenham and the main podcast that we're going to be recording tomorrow once the Leicester game is out of the way today. Who'd have thought my game week rests so much on triple Leicester?
But goes for a lot of us. I think me as well, actually.
Who did you captain? You captained Salah, didn't you?
Yeah.
To date, this game week is obviously for the two people that own Chris Wood, great. But otherwise, those that had Salah, those that didn't. I bought James Maddison and went balls out and put the armband on him as well. So, could be make or break tonight.
Good luck.
Let's talk about People's Poll. The options were and the winner was, sir.
So there were three options, all kind of linked to directly going into deeper subjects within the Super League scandal. One option was Florentino Perez and finances of Real Madrid. We did a podcast on Barcelona's finances 6 to 8 weeks ago. About time we got into Real Madrid's as well, I think. And Perez, I mean, I could make a podcast about Perez's dumb quotes in the last week alone. Some of the staggering stuff coming out of his mouth. So I thought that was worth looking into. Also, another option was the greedy six, as I call them, the decision makers at greedy six. Who are they and what's going to happen to them next? Our patrons are going to get the chance to vote between those two topics for the podcast that we do this Wednesday. That's going to go live for them today on Patreon. But the one you have selected via Twitter is the 50+1 fan ownership rule. And if it is viable in England, that is what we'll be talking about today.
After obviously Arsenal lost to Everton, Liverpool only managed to get a draw at the weekend as well. The European Super League was making more and more sense to me, James. Even after City lost at Leeds, Liverpool drew. It's making more and more sense because half the big six are not good enough to get into the Champions League. No wonder they won it. I was like, now I'm getting the hang of why they're doing this.
Very convenient for the West Ham fan to leave out that Chelsea beat West Ham.
Yeah. It's true. It is true. Having said that, they drew midweek against Brighton, right? And Liverpool had won a couple of games earlier in the month and what have you. But it's not that consistent week in, week out steamrolling teams anymore. It's interesting, just coming back to this 50+1, you phrased it exactly as the 50+1 ownership rule. But it's just, this is one of the big myths that, and obviously the research and stuff, it's not ownership though. It's far from ownership, and understanding the difference between ownership and voting rights and control is a massive part of understanding and trying to get your head around why it may and may not work in the UK, and what's the difference here with both corporate law and how companies are structured, and also how teams are governed and board of directors and what have you.
My voice is fucked. Can you explain to everyone what 50+1 is?
Well, 50+1 is obviously the setup in Germany as it stands and has been for a while, where the fans have 51%. I've never understood why they don't just say 51% rather than 50+1.
It does make it more complicated than it should be, but technically it's 50. It's 50% plus one share.
Right.
That's why it's 50+1.
Right. Makes sense. So the majority ownership of the voting rights are owned by the members, which are the fans in essence, and fans pay a annual membership fee to be part of that pool. So a lot of clubs in the UK do have, like, you can buy a club membership. I've seen it with West Ham quite often, where you don't want to be a season ticket holder, but you want some of the perks. You can, for 20-30 quid a year, become a club member or what have you.
You don't get the same whams to your football club though.
No, you don't, but club membership as a kind of concept exists. It just doesn't mean you get voting rights. So in Germany, to protect the integrity of football, it's been deemed, and to be part of the Bundesliga, you have to have obviously adhere to this 50+1 rule of the voting rights, voting shares of the club.
Correct. And there's plenty of good that comes from this. No less, in fact, season ticket pricing, because fans get a say in obviously how their clubs price things up. Paderborn is actually the most expensive season ticket in the Bundesliga in 2019-20. That was £100 cheaper than the cheapest Premier League season ticket, which was at West Ham that particular season. So this is why one of the things that gets lauded in Germany at the moment, right, is the fan atmosphere, etc. The grounds are always full. They're allowed to take beer to their seats, all these kind of things, which the fans get a say in, that happens across the league, not just at their individual clubs as well. And I think there's a lot of jealousy from British fans at the moment, looking at, obviously not at this moment, but obviously in the last few years or so, the atmosphere in Germany looks incredible. I went to Dortmund a few years ago with Spurs, and you go, this is what I want back at home. This, for a UEFA Cup game, it was an incredible atmosphere. So there's plenty of positives. The fans get a say in what's happening. I don't think it stretches quite to the point of the fans will vote whether they should or should Bayern Munich should or shouldn't buy Erling Haaland, for example.
No, of course. I'm sure
they get a say in the that will be down to whoever's in charge of transfers, etc. They won't get that say, but they get a say in terms of what happens with their club. So if we take the Super League for a second, there were obviously 12, let's say, founder clubs who agreed to go in, but it was meant to be 15 founder clubs, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure from the research I've done that those 3 clubs were meant to be Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich, and Borussia Dortmund.
Correct.
And Paris Saint-Germain was going to be a difficult one because they were in bed, well, they still are in bed with Ceferin and UEFA. The president of PSG has a very good relationship with him, so they didn't want to particularly step away in the immediate. Let's not paint PSG as angels, by the way. And I don't think we should necessarily paint Bayern Munich and Dortmund as angels either, because what would have happened here, Bayern and Dortmund, I understand, were given 30 days to agree to whether they were going to join this Super League or not. Now, obviously, it doesn't matter. It's gone. It's out the window. But the reason they would have been given so long is because they would have had to put this to a vote to their members to allow them to go. And there's every chance that even if it had passed one way or the other, there then could have been an appeal vote as well. So that's why Bayern and Dortmund were going to be given an extension. Now, what Bayern and Dortmund did was sit back and go, let's see what the reaction is to this.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, sod that. Because what they would have done very quickly is there's a lot of pride and tradition in fans' involvement in Germany, and 100% the fans of Bayern and Dortmund would have said, kind of the similar feeling to what would have been happening in the Premier League. You'd have probably got at least a majority of 90% saying, no, we don't want this at a minimum. So they wouldn't have ended up joining. Bayern and Dortmund physically could not have gone in it if the 50+1 had said, no, you're not going in the Super League. So there was no way they could ever commit to it, no way they could break away without having the consultation with their fans, because they also would have been in infringement of Bundesliga law by not consulting with their fans, etc. And I think it's this sort of thing, the fact that, well, Bayern and Dortmund couldn't get taken away because the fans had a voice without even needing to have a voice. They've gone.
No, true.
Bayern Munich have smart people running the football operations. There's former players involved like Rummenigge, Oliver Kahn and stuff. They are actually, the research I've done suggests that Bayern Munich they're an oil machine, right? They're a very well owned football club. And I think the 50+1 conversation come back around because everyone's looked at it and gone, well, shit, this rule has actually prevented Bayern and Dortmund from breaking away from not necessarily the Bundesliga, but from the Champions League and actually going for this. And it's brought up the conversation of fan ownership, because we've obviously seen protests in England over the last week or so at various clubs at various scales in terms of wanting to push the owners out. And a lot of it comes down to trust. My opinion on Daniel Levy right now is I can't trust him anymore. I don't want him to be the custodian of Tottenham because I can't trust him not to do this again in 6 months or a year. When, as much as the stuff that comes out of Perez's mouth is sometimes insanity, he's very clear that he's going to come back to this. And Juan Laporta at Barcelona obviously holds weight as well. And he's saying this is going to come back around as well. So there's a lot of talk of, can we get fan ownership, this 50+1 wall, 50+1 rule, sound like Jonathan Ross then, into fan ownership in England? Do you think, Serge, it could come into play?
No, not in the same way that it is in the Bundesliga.
Why?
But well, can I ask a different question? Right.
Of course.
Let's take it from a different point of view. Why do we want it? Right. Because it's highlighted how it would have stopped one situation, which is the European Super League. But there's other situations where it helps, and there's other situations where it doesn't help. And there's also good examples of clubs that flaunt the rules and what have you. With the likes of Laporte and Perez and stuff, the good thing is that if they don't perform, they can get voted out. They won't get another term as president and what have you. So the people that own the club and the people that run the club don't have to be the same. As much as Daniel Levy has some ownership of Tottenham, the majority of ownership is with Joe Lewis, but he still runs the club and runs the show. So the board of directors that run the club don't have to have necessarily the ownership element to it. And also, is an interesting conversation that we can get down the road of is whether or not that one of the challenges that people will raise to it happening in the UK is whether or not investors will still want to put money into football clubs if they don't have a say in what happens. I think that they still will, because the business side of things and the ownership side of things will still be lucrative. People still want to watch football or go to matches. Sure, the money might not be as big as it is, but the money will still be there. So I don't actually buy the argument that people won't want to invest in football necessarily. The only thing is that maybe the voting rights, you might vote against a particular sponsorship agreement if it's with a betting club or something. Depends on how the rules are set on what the votes can and can't be made on, for example. But back to where I was going to go with this is, I don't think that I think the fans and the board want the same thing. They want the best for the football club. If we take that as a starting point, you want the best for Tottenham, and the board at Tottenham want the best for Tottenham. The difference being, especially on the pitch, financially, you want the best that's in the long-term interests and fits in with the values of Spurs. They want the best that fits in with making more money. So if the check and balance on the board is that the values of Tottenham and the integrity of football are held in higher regard than profit, that's a good thing. But you still want the best for Tottenham at the end of the day. And what's the best for Tottenham in the long run might be not the best thing for Tottenham in the short term financially. And that's where the boards need a kind of check on them, in my opinion. So I think the owners will still be there. They'll still want to put money in because, look, we know the returns that you can make in football, but we need that check and balance on it, integrity and values over financial performance. But I don't think 50+1 in the format that it's in will work in the UK. No.
We can kind of group the 6 English clubs that tried to break away, I believe, into 3 groups at the moment. One is Chelsea and Manchester City. You can group because Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour and his team, they got involved in their football clubs for the sole purpose, I believe, of success. And success will breed the profit that comes with it. Mm-hmm. The second group, which I think Arsenal definitely fall into at the moment, and there's a strong case to say that Manchester United, Liverpool possibly do as well, is that they are run just for profit. And I think that's particularly the case in Arsenal's case, quite worryingly for them at the moment, which is why you've seen such strong protests at Arsenal on Friday night. And then there's the, I'm not sure if the goal is the profit or the success, because the success will breed the profit that comes with success on the pitch. And I think there's a case to say Manchester United and Liverpool might fall into that at the moment. I think I'm not sure where Tottenham fit in that at the moment. If we just run as a profit-based organisation, which a lot of Tottenham fans do believe, or if we're trying to kind of hang in there and find the success, which will then deem the profit. But for the 4 other clubs that I've just mentioned, that seems to be the goal at the end of the day, is money.
I think Tottenham, you would have to say success, because you don't go and appoint the most expensive manager in the world, give or take, in Mourinho. If you're not like, if money is your question here, you don't go and appoint the most expensive manager. And I don't think in the last 2 or 3 years you've been too shy of spending money on decent players if you can. I mean, it's within the means of what your club can afford, but you have been looking for success on the pitch, in my opinion. But balancing it with the new stadium and the financial restraints. But I would say Tottenham are looking for success, trying to balance it.
German clubs were previously run, I believe, until a vote in 1998 as non-profit organisations, and that's when this 51 plus rule came into effect. There have been appeals against this. One notable occurrence, I think, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, was the fans actually managed to get the owner, basically, at Hanover, to stand down. Bild, I think his name was, because he was trying to push against the 50+1 rule, and they went, well, you're not fit to be the decision maker here. We're going to remove you and vote. He's still like an executive director, but he's now not the main decision maker at Hanover. And there are loopholes to 50+1, and it's not all positives. I think the first thing to say is Bayern Munich are about to win their 9th successive Bundesliga. So how fair and open is the competition here? Because essentially Bayern Munich are the biggest club in Germany. They've got more members than anybody else. They inherit a lot more of overseas TV money than other clubs. I believe it's about 60 million more than the club that finishes bottom in the Bundesliga. So there's still loopholes around way that it's not kind of just completely fair. It's not I think domestic rights are shared, but on overseas rights, Bayern Munich seem to make a lot more money than everybody else to get a bigger share of the pie. And what Bayern obviously do as well is they just pick off the competition. So Bayern always buy the best players from the Dortmunds, the Stuttgarts, the Schalkes, even Leipzig. Upamecano's a very highly rated central defender at Leipzig. He's going to go to Bayern Munich in the summer. Their manager, Julian Nagelsmann, may follow him from Leipzig to Bayern Munich. There's every chance that Erling Haaland could yet end up at Bayern Munich from Dortmund. And we've seen Bayern took Lewandowski. They took Matt Hummels from Dortmund, Mario Götze. So Bayern just pick off the other clubs. And one of the negatives of 50+1 is because not all investment's bad, right? When the principal idea came in 1998 it was basically to scare off investors. The likes of Abramovich or Sheikh Mansour could have well looked at a Bundesliga club previously without the 50+1 rule, but it's no real reason why they would have. Why would you share the power if you don't have to, and you can go and invest in a club like Chelsea or Manchester City? Plus, Red Bull Leipzig have obviously massively loopholed this 50+1 rule. Yeah. So Leipzig were formerly a 5th division tier team called SSV Markranstadt. Excuse my German pronunciation. Yes, I did study at school and only got a D. But what they did is they took over the club, a relatively unknown 5th division club, and rebranded everything. Now, under that, they couldn't gain access to the Bundesliga if they went through the leagues without being on board with the 50+1 model. So where Bayern Munich has like
200,000 plus.
I think that's the number I saw. Yeah.
Dortmund's at about 140,000, give or take 150,000.
Yeah. So obviously, the bigger the club, the more members you've got. And I think a membership at Bayern Munich I saw was around about £60 annually.
Yeah.
Which actually, when you put that alongside a season ticket being worth about £200 or £250, it's actually quite a lot. So
it is.
You've still got to make a considerable investment if you want to be a member and have this be part of the voting process, if you will. Whereas Leipzig, rather than having, say, 30,000 season ticket holders and members or something, they have 17.
It's nothing relatively. And just for the listeners, because I had to check this. James doesn't mean 17,000.
No, I mean 17.
17. So you're talking 200,000, 140,000. This is 17. And of course, what they say is that over half of them work for a certain Austrian drinks manufacturer called Red
Can we
Bull.
say who they are? It's fairly legit, but yeah.
So yeah,
Even the 17 members, it's not 17 fans. It's 17 people who basically work for Red Bull. So when they have to have some sort of fan dialogue, they're all in the pocket basically, and they just pass everything through to whatever they want.
there's manipulation of loopholes, and when you study Red Bull Leipzig, you feel like this is a creation of a loophole or what have you to the extreme. What happens if I want to become a member of RB Leipzig? Because I know compared to Bayern Munich, 60 euros or 70 euros a year, you're talking about 800 euros at Leipzig. So it's a lot more expensive. Yeah. But I got the money. I got 700 quid in my pocket. Can I just go and become a member at RB Leipzig?
I don't think you can, no.
So then what's the point? Because I feel like RB Leipzig is a classic example of the ways that UK clubs will end up trying to manipulate the rules around fan ownership, etc., etc. And this is part of the reason why, when we come back to it, I said originally, I don't think it will work in the UK because we'll look for ways around it.
I'd probably need to do some digging to see if we could get a membership at Red Bull Leipzig for 800 quid a year or so. Maybe we can get a GoFundMe or something. Yeah, exactly.
Patrons this month, you're all paying an extra 50p, but don't worry, we're all going to own.
We're going to own Red Bull
have a
Leipzig.
Voting right at Red Bull Leipzig.
Can I be honest as well, Serge? This seems like a surefire way to get us hated as well. So I don't really believe. I mean,
obviously they're going against the spirit of what's happened, and it's caused them to be the most hated club in Germany, let's say. And I did hear a story.
They've rebranded and took over a football club. I mean, can you imagine that happening here with a Barnet? It's just a principal idea. I think that's what a lot of fans have the fear of at the moment, was if the Super League started, what was then to say that home games wouldn't be played in Asia or America or whatever? What's to say they wouldn't just change the club badge without consultation? Or, there was a case a couple of years ago where Everton changed their badge, and there wasn't consultation about it, and the Everton fans hated it, and they changed it back. They thought they were being clever, but they didn't speak to their people and draw up, a demographic idea. What do you think of this idea? They didn't speak. They just went, we're changing it. And Everton fans thought, we hate this. Can you change it back, basically? So they changed it back. And I think that's part of, we're speaking there about an incident with a club that's outside the so-called Big Six, who they realised quite quickly they had to speak to their people. They spoke to their people about moving stadium and stuff, right? We know they're going to build a new stadium, etc. That's what we want. I'd never wanted no Tottenham fan wanted Tottenham to end up in Stratford. There was actually, in the case of that, at least there was dialogue.
Yeah,
I know there was dialogue, but it wasn't listening to the dialogue, which was the dialogue was, do not take Tottenham out of Tottenham. Oh, if we have to go, we'll have to go. Because Levy's case was, well, we can't build the stadium here. What do you want us to do? And I think a few people were like, Jesus, this is not good, right? Anyway, that's off topic. One thing I would say about 50+1, if it happens here, it's going to have a similar effect to what's happened in Germany in terms of putting off investors. So if you take Newcastle United fans are obviously desperate for investment at the moment. If you want to become a super club, you probably don't want 50+1 right now. Whereas the likes of Arsenal, who would obviously have serious membership owners, etc., would probably stay at their level. If 50+1 right now would seem like it would be great for Arsenal, I'm not so sure it would be great for a Newcastle United who are trying to break into that movement. And like we said, right, Bayern are about to win their 9th Bundesliga title. No other club in Germany has ever won it more than 5 times. And there was a period in the noughties where a lot of clubs were sharing the Bundesliga title. Wolfsburg won a title. Stuttgart won a title. Where the Bremen, obviously Borussia Dortmund, Schalke, they all won titles. But it's hard to see now that unless Leipzig power on the money, and we've just said about Upamecano going to Bayern and Nagelsmann may follow. So you're still basically a feeder club to Bayern Munich. Dortmund are still a selling club. How are you ever going to wrestle back the dominance of Bayern? And it might even be that they get so bored of it out in Germany that eventually they might vote against it in the future to say, well, it's a one-team league.
Yeah, I do get that. I'm not convinced, James, that it will put investors off because they still have the ownership. Like if you can still turn a small profit on the club, it might be an interesting investment. But I just think it will put people to think a lot more longer term. And they'll have to understand that financial success will only follow sporting success rather than trading on players or trying to maximize commercial deals or what have you. So it definitely will put off certain types of investor, but I don't think it will put off all types of investor. If there is less money in football, I don't think that's necessarily such a bad thing. The way I look at it is, I mean, your club on Friday, the Supporters Trust released a really detailed and good statement, which really echoed a lot of the stuff that you'd said in the week previously, but talked about how can we trust them and what do we want moving forward. And it talked about the removal of the current ownership, but having a seat at the table, at the board. And I think for me, the first solution is having more representation at the board level, right? Where the decisions are made. Now, if you had one representative from the Supporters Trust versus 8 other board members, I don't think that will necessarily sway things, but it's a start point of a voice. And I think that's a better balance. I had a question for you, which I was thinking about, right? How would you feel about your club captain and your team's manager sitting on the board?
Jesus, well, did you imagine what I'd have said to that last week?
Yeah, sure. But how would you feel? Because if Harry Kane and Jose Mourinho or what have you had a seat at the board, how would you feel?
I think that's a dangerous line to go down. And the simple reason for that is, like, if you're saying to me now, would I be happy for Hugo Lloris or Harry Kane to have a seat at the table and represent
Lloris is your club captain,
represent their players and stuff, then fine. But I mean, if you put Hugo Lloris there, for example, Hugo Lloris might go back to France this summer, right? And go and play for someone else.
But the thing is, players come and go and managers come and go all the time anyway. At the moment, they're employed by your club. You have to believe that they have your club's best interests at heart, right? I don't think there's anything that they would learn at a board meeting, or maybe at least for certain parts of the board meeting where footballing matters were discussed or what have you. Because for me, it's like, interesting, club captain, would I want Mark Noble there? Yeah, sure. Would I want David Moyes there? Yeah, sure. And firstly, do they have the ability and capability to act as a board level director? I think they do. And I think if they didn't, they would be able to learn what is expected of them to be a board level director in terms of compliance and making sure that governance standards are correct and what have you. Maybe not for everything, but definitely for the footballing matters. Am I then worried that the change would mean that information that was supposed to be held private or secret would then go to another club, for example? Probably a little bit, which is why maybe you ring fence what they're involved with. But there was 2 issues last week with the European Super League. One was lack of fan consultation. The other was the players were caught blindsided. And so I'm really interested in boards now. I think the next step for me would be boards now having fan, player, and playing management representation. So I think the manager, the club captain, and whoever's the head of the Supporters Trust should have a seat on the board.
I don't even think it needs to be captain, because I think in some cases that probably doesn't work. Like the best on-field captain is not necessarily the best representative to go and sit down and speak to the chairman.
Okay, so the players could vote for a player representative.
I think that's probably a better way of doing it.
Because I was looking down the managers in the league, right? You've got the likes of Graham Potter. He's got a bloody management and psychology degree. You're telling me he's not capable of sitting at board level and having discussions?
Maybe he doesn't want to. That's the other.
I don't think so. But based on what happened last week, I think every manager would want to say and understanding in what's going on at that level, or at least in certain elements of it. Because you're right, if it's talking about who the next sponsor is on the shirt, I don't think he gives them a monkeys. But if we're talking about the competitions that they're involved in, or
but how often is that conversation ever going to come up?
It's not going to come up at board level, to be fair.
If you take obviously, listen, the Super League is a very rare case. In the case of what happened there, 100%, at the very minimum, before even the supporters, the players and the managers should have been told what was going to happen, because they should have been told, listen, you're going to have to walk into a shitstorm in the next week, right? You need to know what's going on. So most footballers were turning up to training on Monday going, what is this? Like, is it even real? Or the players, I mean, it's fairly clear. Nobody had a clue. And then from a player perspective point of view, it's almost like I came to meet you for People's Poll podcast on a Monday, and you said to me, I've changed the name. it's not playing at FPL anymore.
Yeah.
What have you not even talked to me? Or he's a little bit, and I'd have to go, well, he's the fucking boss. I can't shout at the boss. I'm going to get sacked myself, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, and that's why the players were in and the managers were in such a difficult position last week.
Hello, everybody, welcome to Red Bull Planet FPL. We are now, no, we're not. We are not RB Planet FPL yet.
We need.
I get the point. It needs representation, but what my concern about what I said there is like one supporters trust, one manager, one player, whatever it may be, is again they can still be outvoted. So it doesn't change the dynamic on ownership and investment, but it gives them a voice, and that's the start point where things are heard, listened, and they have some voting rights.
The other important thing of that is because one of the things that in the supporters trust statement from Tottenham on Friday was that it wouldn't be someone from the current Tottenham Hotspur supporters trust. It would have to be another fan representative who got it. And my brain started going immediately, and I went, "Oh, I'm gonna have to give up the podcast." Sod that. But if you're in the room.
If you've got that offer, take it, mate. You make more money. Trust me.
I'm not. Yeah, I think I'll be in prison. If you're in that room and you've got, you can at least hear the conversations, can't you? So you can then report back to supporters trust and say, this is what was said in this room. And that's why I've spoke to you before about the supporters trust at Tottenham would have these meetings with the board twice a season. And one of the ones in December was, if you're thinking of going for this, you need to talk to us. And Levy said, well, I know fans, so I know the opinion. So I don't need to speak. You don't know the opinion, mate.
Yeah.
It's you're in your head. So at least anything, say, look, we put this to Daniel Levy or the Glazers or X or whomever's there and say, this is the proposal. This is what was spoken about. This is what the plan is. And then the fans are in the middle of it and know what's going on. Because for all we know, genuinely, all we know at the moment is that Daniel Levy's picked up the phone to Joe Lewis and said, I really don't think we should do this. And Joe Lewis has said, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually know that. Daniel Levy's never going to come out and say, I was pressured into this by Joe Lewis in terms of trying to join the league on behalf of Tottenham. We'd never know that. But being in that room would help, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
We definitely need to get fan representation because it's not just, I think what it's done is woken people up to a lot of things. So like obviously the social media blackout against racism at the weekend, which I know not everybody's in agreement with, but my argument is we have to start somewhere.
Agreed.
So I'm in full support of that. And while we're on a blackout, we'll release a podcast on it next Monday as well. And that'll be the first tweet after the blackout we release and go, yeah, this is us talking about it in detail about what happens next. But I think it's woken fans up to important matters like that. So, okay, right, if we group together, we can put a bit of pressure on social media companies. We can potentially put pressure on less important things, but do matter to fans like ticket pricing, etc. When you compare that Bayern Munich have just won the Champions League and you can buy a season ticket at the Allianz for about 250 quid, and I'm paying 5 times that at Tottenham to watch fucking Mourinho football, which thankfully I actually didn't see much of. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's not right. Are things 5 times more expensive in England than they are in Germany? I don't think that's the case.
No, not at all.
So, and no one's saying that you're going to drop it immediately back down to 250 quid season tickets or something. No, I don't think you can pass that sort of thing through. But we could get to a point now we say, well, this is the level where it's going to be for the next 10, 20 years or so. Calm down. Stop mugging off the fans because you don't need the fans' money anymore. You've seen that. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, they're all still going, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I know there's a big concern in Madrid that they can't compete anymore. That's what they're worried about. They've got a debt like Barcelona. They need the Super League to be able to compete with the likes of PSG, Man City, etc. And I don't think they can. But apparently they're about to sign David Alaba on 400 grand a week, ironically, from Bayern Munich. So stop being stupid with money if you're that worried about it.
Yeah, they're two completely unrelated things, right? If you had fan representation at board level, I don't think the fans would stop something like that transfer or the club spending so much. But at some point, someone must say, hang on a second, this debt is not affordable anymore. The likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid, I think, will struggle to win any European competition for a while. I mean, albeit Real Madrid are in the semis against Chelsea, but you don't see them beating PSG or Man City at the moment.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say, hypothetically, because we know this would never happen, right? That the board at West Ham came out and said, we've got a deal in place to sign Messi.
Mm-hmm.
And I use Messi specifically because it's probably not a resale in it because of his age, etc. Right?
Yep.
And they said, we can get arguably the greatest player that's ever lived. We can get him here for 2-3 years, and we're going for it. We're going to try and win the league. We're going to try and win the Champions League. We're going to win. We're going to try for everything. But in the process of doing so, we are going to put the future of the football club's existence at risk. Do you go for it or not?
No.
Of course you don't.
No. Not at all.
And that's the point.
It's not even.
No sane fan is going to say go for that.
In my heart, seeing Messi in that fucking claret and blue is I can see it. I can visualize it. I can taste it.
Go and play FIFA.
My head is just like, forget about it. Not even worth it. Not even worth it. We spent years and years, 2 or 3 years of maybe glory for another 20 years after that of misery and mediocrity. I'm not going to.
It's also interesting because I do quite often say, like Portsmouth wouldn't swap the FA Cup win. Wigan wouldn't. I mean, Wigan was different. It wasn't actually a financial problem. Portsmouth obviously were on the brink, right? They went into administration 18 months after winning the FA Cup and a year after playing AC Milan in Europe and stuff. And I always say Portsmouth fans wouldn't swap that day out in 2008 when they won the FA Cup. But I bet actually, if they could have made the decision before winning the FA Cup and realised what financial problems the club was being put through, someone in a fan representation at board level would have said, you need to stop signing players on stupid wages, etc. We can't afford to do this, because the future of Portsmouth is obviously it's very much a community club in a city, right? Of a one club city, if you will. They would not have allowed it. I think that's the point here. One of the things I realised over the last week or so is after Bury and other clubs we spoke about, like Wigan and Bolton, etc., my worry was always that we need to protect these clubs in terms of getting fan involvement, proper legislation in terms of not letting them outspend their needs, etc. What I realised over the last week or so is that my club needs protecting from these people as well for differing reasons. Tottenham's probably not going to go out of business anytime soon, but it also needs protecting in terms of the identity of what the club means to the people of Tottenham, the fans who go through the turnstiles. I've used the analogy more of Liverpool in terms of what the community means, that football club means to the red side of the people of Merseyside. If you look back at how these football clubs were formed, they're all formed from groups of working people, right? Yep. That's what football came from. Football didn't evolve in other than the rare cases of Red Bull Leipzig. Football clubs didn't kind of evolve from, okay, let's buy and start from scratch. And actually, I didn't even know until I researched what the name of the football club was that Leipzig took apart. But if it happened in England, I would.
For sure.
Wimbledon is the perfect case of what happened there. It was unforgivable. And that's why many fans here just cannot stomach Milton Keynes Dons, because it took a football club's identity. And obviously Wimbledon reformed as a Phoenix club and are basically now at the same level as Milton Keynes Dons. So what did you achieve other than you put a football club in Milton Keynes? You didn't actually achieve a lot. There have been loads in the lower leagues requests for new Phoenix clubs this week from supporters of a lot of clubs. I don't think not even just the big six actually say, do you know what? I want to push back on this now. I can't support my club anymore because it's not affordable, etc. And actually thinking of starting new clubs, like you got FC United of Manchester, for example. We need to give something back to the fans, and the first thing is a voice. But I'm not convinced on this 50+1 yet, actually.
No, me neither. But I think we need to take some steps in that direction. I am convinced that the Premier League and the FA and the government will use this as an opportunity to try and put something in place. Whether money talks again and nothing happens, we'll have to wait and see over time. But I do think that this opportunity will be used to try and put something into place.
One thing that 50+1 would definitely do is it would kill the Super League.
Yeah. Done. Because with no English teams, forget about it. There's no point. So,
well, the English
but I
clubs
think
wouldn't be able to join it because it's very clear that the English fans would not let their club go and join it.
I think the Super League is quite dead anyway. But yeah, agreed.
I think it's going to come back to the table just in a different form. One of Perez's mad quotes that are a little bit more normal this week is, okay, maybe we should have open and fair competition. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Because again, we did a podcast on the Champions League reform 4 weeks ago and we do not like it. No one is painting UEFA or FIFA to be angels. UEFA is like Ilkay Gundogan. Listen to whatever I said on one of the podcasts last week, because he pretty much tweeted word for word what I said. It's the lesser of the two evils, which just to stay with UEFA at the moment, and that's correct. Some sort of reform is a word you'll keep hearing about. Needs to happen not just within English football, but in European football as a whole, right? Because as we've said, how are you going to give the chance of the Ajaxes, etc., to be back at the top table? That's obviously off topic from fan ownership. But if 50+1, and the only way it's going to happen is if government says that's what you're going to do.
Yep.
And by the way, I think there's every chance that a next government would say, okay, we need to take that back away now. But if it did get implemented, then quite clearly it would take the power away from these madmen who think they know best for money. And that's the sort of thing that might, in the case of, say, a Kroenke at Arsenal, whereas at the moment it seems like the noises out of them is like they're not going to sell. I mean, your Spotify guy, the Swedish fella, I forget his name.
Yeah, he said, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
We'll have to remove the podcast from Spotify if he takes over Arsenal, mate.
I think more people listen there than anywhere else.
Yeah, we're in trouble as well if that happens. But if the 50+1 came in, I think that's at the point where Kroenke go, well, actually, what profit am I making out of this? And it's clear he's there for the money, right? He's bad. It's really bad. I think Arsenal have got the worst of it with the ownership actually at the moment with Kroenke. The noises are at the moment that he's not going to give up on it, but 50+1's the sort of thing that might go, well, I ain't got no say anymore. I can't. That would rule out any idea of, heaven forbid, changing the colour of the kit or something. Let's not pretend it can't happen. We've seen it, Cardiff City, right?
Yep.
Cardiff City got promoted to the Premier League and Vincent Tan went, I want to play in red.
Yeah.
And a lot of Cardiff fans, don't get me wrong, the majority of Cardiff fans were massively against it. But a lot of Cardiff fans identified with the fact that they were a Welsh football club and Wales playing red, rugby, football, etc. And they kind of accepted, well, if this is part of what being in the Premier League is, fine, we're playing red. Now, the majority of Cardiff fans were like, fuck off. We used to sing to Cardiff fans, you're supposed to be in blue. And all they used to sing back is, like, in our hearts, we were always in blue. We always used to go, oh, fair enough then. And eventually they fought back against it. But it's interesting, if Cardiff had stayed in the Premier League for 3 or 4 years in red, they might still be in red.
Yeah,
these are the sort of things can't happen because I don't want to see Tottenham playing anything other than white, except when we play at Leeds United, we have to play in something different. You can't ever put me in red.
No.
No way. So the traditions of football clubs, which were started off these people who formed football clubs in many cases 150 to 125 years ago, still mean something to the people who go and the people in these places. And I think that's still important. You can be a fan of Manchester United on the other side of the world, but you have to still respect the cultures of Manchester United being a football club from Manchester and what the people of Manchester feel, etc.
Indeed. Well put, and I totally agree. And maybe we'll have a follow-up on it as things progress with legislation and how it comes out. And as part of Tottenham tomorrow, I'd be interested to talk about what the atmosphere was like with the fans at the stadium and how they took to, obviously, was there any talk?
Your throat feels a bit better than it did half hour ago. I can tell you that, actually.
Fantastic. Listeners, thank you for joining us today on the People's Poll. Again, if you are a patron, stay tuned later for your Q&A. We have a main podcast tomorrow once the Leicester Crystal Palace game is done and dusted, reviewing all of game week 33. Yeah, it's 33, isn't it? Just losing my numbers.
Yes.
And where we're up to with FPL and all of the usual stuff with that. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man. Show.